Hi, it's Steve Hargadon. Welcome to the final hours of the Global STEMX Education Conference. We're either exhausted or we're energized. I can't decide which. We have had about 3,000 attendee logins over the last, well, actually for the first 2 days. We'll see how we end up, but it's really been a lot of fun, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Welcome to Julia Stiglitz from Cousera. Julia, these numbers probably sound paltry to you, but they're a big deal to us.
It's great to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You didn't take my compliment? Thanks to Hewlett Packard and ISTE, to our other sponsors. Again, you only hear about them in this beginning slide. To their great credit, they've provided for this free opportunity, and we're sure appreciative of them. So this is a chance for those of you who are participating in the chat to indicate where you are located. Look for the star to the left of the map, double click, and then click on the map. We've been so nice and global for the last 2 days. I'm waiting until we see a global star. Hawaii doesn't count. Oh, South Africa comes through. Okay, keep those notices in the chat of where you are, time, temperature, anything else that's fun to know. And we're going to move forward now. And Julie, I'm going to turn the time over to you. I'm here to help you in any way that I can. And if you decide to do Q&A at the end, I'd be glad to manage that for you.
Terrific. Thank you, Steve. Great. So it's really wonderful to be here. It is an unusually rainy Sunday morning in San Francisco, and I know it looks like a lot of people are joining from all over. And thank you for spending an hour on a Saturday talking about MOOCs. So as I said, my name is Julia Stiglitz. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Business Development at Cousera. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about what's happening at Cousera, what's happened over the last year, and some of the things that we're seeing. So as some of you might be familiar, it all really started as a series of experiments. So 3 Stanford professors decided to teach their classes online for anyone to take in the world. So they sent out a few emails, and within a few weeks, over 100,000 students had enrolled in each of their classes. Andrew Ng, who's in this picture, he's one of the co-founders of Cousera, and his machine learning class was one of the 3 classes. So his machine learning class normally has about 400 students in it. You can see those 4 little people in the center of it. Those represent how many people he normally is able to reach over the course of a year. When he taught the class online, he was able to reach 100,000 students. It would have taken him about 250 years to reach that number of students through traditional teaching. So after he taught that class, he teamed up with Daphne Kohler, another Stanford professor, and they decided to launch Cousera. So Cousera launched in April of 2012. I started about a month later. And we launched with 4 partner universities, with Stanford, Princeton, University of Michigan, and University of Pennsylvania. And when we launched, we had about 300,000 students. And since then, we've grown quite rapidly. So we currently have 87 of the world's top institutions, including 25 of the top 50 U.S. Universities by U.S. News & World Report, and over 31 of the top 60 universities worldwide. And you can see just a few of the names of the universities that we're working with. And we've also launched in May of last year a category on Cousera that focuses on teacher professional development. So this is both working with some of the ed schools of our partner universities, including Johns Hopkins and Vanderbilt and University of Virginia, as well as a new set of partners that are really focused on teacher professional development, like the New Teacher Center or Relay Graduate School of Education, match education, as well as a few museums that are doing teacher professional development in their specific content areas. So the Exploratorium or the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And they have some really cool upcoming classes, which you can see here. You can go to our site to visit. Our students are coming from all over the world. So as I mentioned, we started with 4 partners. We now have 87 partners. We started with about 300,000 students. We now have over 4.7 million students enrolled. And our students are coming from all over. So about 2/3 of our students are coming from outside of the U.S. About 40% of our students are coming from emerging markets. And India is actually our 2nd largest market after the U.S. And they're signing up for a huge range of classes. The average class size is between 30 and 60,000 students. And the largest class to date has been about 180,000 students. And that was a philosophy class from Duke University called Think Again, How to Reason and Argue, which is not what we expected, but it has by far been the largest class to date. And there's just a huge range from computer science classes to we actually have a class on horse nutrition from Edinburgh University. So a huge range of classes. But behind all of these massive numbers, what's really driving this are some of the individual student stories, and I'll share just a few of them. So starting from the right, this is Jolene Campbell. So she took a course, a sociology course on our platform, and she was able to meet someone that she actually ended up starting an NGO with. And then in the center, there's a student who's actually the first student that I met when I joined Coursera a year and a half ago. His name is Ashkat. So I was trying to figure out, why were our students signing up for our classes and what was really motivating them. And I met Ashkat in one of the conversations that I had. And he, at the time, was a senior in college in Kazakhstan and had basically taken all of our computer science classes. His university didn't offer these. And so he took all of them and literally stapled the certificate of accomplishment to the back of his grad school application and used it to apply to grad school in artificial intelligence and machine learning in the U.S. And then finally, on the far left, there's Daniel Bergman. He's a 17-year-old severely autistic boy from the U.S. He has a working speaking vocabulary of about 150 words. And he took Alfield Reese's modern poetry class from the University of Pennsylvania. And it was actually the first formal class that he had actually been able to fully sit through. The first time, because of his disability, the first class that he had been able to really participate in. And at the end of the class, they had Alfield Reese at the Writers' House at the University of Pennsylvania. He invited anyone who was in the local area to come there physically, and then he also did a webcast so that people could virtually attend this final session. And Daniel and his father went and visited Al, which is where the picture is from. In the final session, people went around the room and said what the experience meant to them, and Daniel raised his hand and said the words, "not impossible," which I think speaks to the impact that the class had on him. And then Daniel's gone on to take 5 other classes, and this is a wall in his room. This is a picture that he sent us where he captures his learning. So what I want to do with the rest of our time is to talk a little bit about what our courses actually look like, what the design of the course is, and then talk about the community aspects of the courses. And then go into how these courses could be used to improve learning outcomes, and then finally talk a little bit about what's ahead. Okay, so to start out, these are full courses. So the courses have a start date, they have homework with deadlines, and they have an end date. And at the end of the course, you get a statement of accomplishment or a certificate of completion. And this graph here shows traffic for one course across the course's lifetime, and you can actually see based on the spikes in traffic when homework is due. So you can see that procrastination is something that is universal. There's essentially 3 parts to the course. The first part is video. The second part is assignments or assessments, and then the third part is social. So what we're looking at here are a few examples of how different professors have done the video portion of the class. So you see there's a sustainability course from University of Illinois where the professor did a lot of his video lectures on site. Modern poetry in the bottom right, which is the class that I mentioned before, he actually videotaped him doing a deep dive of the poetry with 7 of his teaching assistants. And the Introduction to Sociology class from Princeton, for this class, for some of his lectures, he actually did a Google Hangout with 9 of his students where they had a discussion, and then this was broadcast out to the rest of the class. And the videos are all short 10-minute chunks, or about 10-minute chunks. And the reason is this graph here shows students' self-reported attention span over the course of a normal class. And as you can see, at about 10 minutes, you really start losing a lot of students. So all of the videos are intended to be short to keep students engaged. And then during the videos, little in-video quizzes pop up that ask students to reflect on their work or to answer certain questions to keep them engaged and focus on the most salient points. So then the second portion of the class, the second part of the class, is this assignment part. And this is really critical. So this is a study from Science that shows that even basic retrieval practice, so asking students, what did you just hear, what did you just learn, has a big impact in achievement. And we're doing lots more than that. So there's multiple choice, there's short answer, which we can grade in an automated fashion. We can do mathematical expressions or derivations. And this one is showing mathematical expressions or derivations. We can also do programming assignments or structured data sets, like analyzing Excel spreadsheets. And that's all done in an automated fashion because, you know, if you have 180,000 students, you obviously can't have teaching assistants who grade all of that work. And then one of the questions that often comes up is how do you deal with a class like modern poetry, or how do you deal with a class like Introduction to Songwriting, which is another class that's on our platform, where multiple choice really isn't the best way to assess that. And there, what we've developed is something that it's a large peer review platform where students are able to evaluate each other's work. So students are given an assignment, they're given a rubric that's created by the professors, and then they evaluate each other's work based on that. And I'll quickly go into, I'm going to skip ahead one slide to talk on that. So this is an example of a peer graded assignment where it's an open-ended assignment which could look like a variety of different things, and students are asked to evaluate each other's work. So here is the rubric that they're given. And what we've seen, what was shown before we actually started developing this, was that there's a strong correlation between how students evaluate each other's work and how a teaching assistant would grade their work. And there's actually an even stronger correlation. The red is shown a student's self-reported grades, and there's actually a stronger correlation with how a student would grade themselves with how a teaching assistant would grade them. So we saw this before we launched the peer grading, and then we launched the peer grading, and we wanted to see if this trend was holding true in our massive platform. So in the sociology class, which is one of the first classes that implemented peer grading, the teaching assistants actually graded by hand every single assignment. And what they saw was that correlation holds, that how peers grade each other is strongly correlated with how a teaching assistant would grade them. But what we've seen is it actually really depends on the rubric. So you need to have a strong rubric in order to be able to get the type of results that you're seeing in that correlation. So this is from human interaction class from Stanford University. And the professor essentially tested 2 different rubrics to see how that impacted the range of scores. And you can see in this rubric, in the first rubric on the left, the range of scores is much smaller than the rubric on the right, which has a much larger range of scores. So the quality of the rubric is extremely important in order to get good results on a massive peer grading platform. The types of assignments that you can do through peer grading are pretty remarkable, and our professors have really challenged us to think about what's possible to do online. So this is actually from a design class from University of Pennsylvania, and their final project was to create a physical artifact. And these are 3 examples of the final projects in the class. So you see on the far left, this is a student from India who created a laptop table. You see that there's a student from Spain who created a mobile device holder, and then this is actually a student from the U.S. who created a nap cap, which, you know, at traditional conferences, participants would often love to have a nap cap while listening to presentations, but you all are at home, so you don't need one of these. So the third component of the class is the social component. And the primary place where social activity what happens is the forums. So here's just a video shot of the forums. The average response time is about 22 minutes. So you could ask a question at any time, day or night, and there will literally be someone else that's up and that is online, that's in the forums, that can answer your question. And it's actually, one of my favorite things is going into classes the first day of class. When the class is just open, then everyone pours into the class, and they're so excited, like it's the first day of school, and everyone announces where they're from and why they're there, and start meeting each other, and it's really cool. And I would recommend, even if you're not taking the class, to go to one of our classes on the first day that it starts and just see that initial social interaction that people from literally every single country in the world are having in these classes. And what this graph shows is basically that the larger the class, the faster the response time in the forum. So there's real benefits in terms of scale when it comes to students responding to each other and having the forums be effective. But there's other ways that our professors and the class are building community. So the sociology class that I mentioned, the professor, and some of the other classes are doing this as well. The professor invited 9 of the students to do a live discussion with him, and then he broadcasted it out to the rest of the class, and the rest of the class could, in a live Google Hangout, and the rest of the class could write in questions. The other thing that we've done in some of our classes is integrate Google Hangouts, student-driven Google Hangouts. So when we first launched this, we actually just put the Google Hangout into the class, and students could go into it if they wanted to. But what we found was that if nobody was in the Google Hangout, nobody else would join, because you don't really join a Hangout by yourself. And so what we worked with Google, and we implemented a scheduling feature. So you could schedule a Hangout to go into. And this is still a work in progress, because again, when you first get into the Hangout, people don't know exactly what to do or what to talk about or how to interact. And so the next stage of it is rolling out some sort of agenda or roles so that students know how to interact with each other on these Google Hangouts. But I think it's a really cool feature that can really, it adds another element to these online classes that I think could be really important for learning. And then people are also meeting up face-to-face. So over 24,000 people have signed up for a physical meetup somewhere in the world. They're meeting up to discuss specific classes, or they're meeting up just to have other people to study with. So I've dropped in on a few of these meetups in San Francisco, and it's literally 8 random people who want to study together, and it's really neat. We're also seeing at some companies they're organizing groups around these classes. So at another ed tech company, Edmodo, one of the engineers organized a study group around introduction to computer science, and some of the non-engineers in the company took that class, and they all took together, and it was facilitated by one of their engineers. So there's this, people are self-organizing these offline components to our classes that I think are making the learning experience even richer. And I think it's something that we're really excited about and really want to support. Okay, so now I'm going to go into looking at improving learning outcomes and what we're seeing here. So I guess what's first important to understand is why students are taking these classes, and that's something that that we spend a lot of time digging into and trying to understand. So this is one survey that we did with our students. And about 60% of our students said that they were taking the classes for general enjoyment, for curiosity or general interest. About 50% of students, and they could check more than one box, about 50% of students said that they were interested in job-related skills. So they wanted skills that they could use to apply to their jobs. And about 30% of students were current students who wanted to use it to supplement their work. And it's interesting, we're actually seeing students' different intentions play itself out in terms of how students actually engage in the platform. So what this graph is here is a heat map that shows students' activity across various dimensions. The red is more students, the blue is less students. So if we start at the first graph, A, what we can see, and this is looking at lectures by assignment, so the percentage of students that watched lectures by assignment. So if we look at the very top left, you can see that there's this group of students, a large group of students, who watched every single lecture, 100% of the lectures, but didn't do any of the assignments. So for them, they wanted to take the class, they're interested in learning the material, but maybe they were done with homework. You know, they're finished school, they're done with that, they didn't want to do it. And that's fine. And then if we look at the bottom right, this is looking at forum activity and then assignments. And again, you see that there's this group of students that they're engaged in all the social activities. And this is that if you look at like the turquoise color on the left, they're engaged in a lot of the social activities, they're on the forums, but they're not necessarily doing the assignments. So students are engaging in the platform in very different ways and have very different intentions when it comes to these classes. You know, it's literally 4 clicks and it doesn't cost anything to start a Stanford class. And so there's a lot of students that are peeking in for curiosity or, you know, want to see what the class is all about, but aren't necessarily, don't necessarily want to take all of the class, but do all of the homework and complete the class. And so we actually see that reflected as well in terms of our retention numbers. So about 45% of students who complete the first assignment complete the class, but of the students that enrolled, the total number of students that enrolled, only about 5% end up completing all of the assignments. And that's, I think, what we would be likely to expect, just given that students want to engage in the platform in different ways. So as I mentioned, about 50% of students are interested in taking the class for job-related skills. So one of the things that we heard from them was that they wanted something that they could put on their resumes, that they felt confident that they could show employers. So we rolled out this feature called Signature Check, where what we do is we take the student's picture and we take a picture of their license and we record their keystroke biometrics, so their unique typing pattern, and this is their identity profile. And then every time they log in to take a quiz, they have to type in a few sentences so that we can recognize their keystroke biometrics and we know that they are them. And at the end of the class, if they do this, if they successfully complete it, they get a certificate which is co-branded with us and the university, and it has a unique URL so you can't forge it. And the cost is between $30 and $100. So for a lot of our students that are really interested in taking the class for career reasons, they opt into the signature track to have a higher level of, because they want that verified certificate and they want that level of authentication. But it's also having this really interesting impact on retention for the students that sign up for it. So what we're looking at here is a graph that shows the completion rates for one of our first classes that we used Signature Track with. It was a nutrition class. And the first column on the left, you can see the total registered students. And the red, or the pink, is non-signature track. So about 7% of registered students overall completed the class. The blue is signature track students. And what you see is that about 74% of the students that are enrolled in signature track completed the course. So you might be thinking, well, you know, those are the really motivated students. Those are the students that really care about finishing, so they just self-selected into that group. So what we did was about 2 weeks into the class, we surveyed the students and said, how committed are you to finishing the class? And so the two columns on the far right show the students that said that they were highly committed to finishing the class, that they wanted to finish the class. And what you can see there is of the students that said that they were highly committed to finishing the class, about 95% of the students on signature track completed it, and about 84% of the students that weren't on signature track completed it. So there's something about being on signature track that, that really helps students complete the class. And maybe it's, the sunk cost fallacy where students feel like they paid for it and so they have to complete it, or maybe it's some sort of escalation of commitment where by signing up for signature track they feel a higher level of commitment, or maybe it's because they really value the certificate that they get out of it and they really want that at the end of it. But it is having a big impact on retention for those students. We're also doing a number of experiments to see what other ways, what things can we do to impact retention and achievement within our classes. And for us, our classes are massive, so it's very easy to be able to quickly run an experiment and to test a subset of the population and to quickly get results. So this was an experiment that we did, an email experiment that we did. And basically what we did was we sent out these emails that had 4 components to it. So it showed what you did last week, so it logged all your activity, like I logged into the class, I participated in the forums, I turned in this assignment, and then it had the second part of the email was upcoming deadlines, the third part was links to the upcoming videos, and then the final part was my progress bar. And so we did an experiment where students were given some combination of these 4 elements to the email. And some only had one, some had all of them, various combinations to see what actually could influence, what parts of this email could actually influence retention. And what we saw was that if you send an email with just the deadlines, only the deadlines, this is on the far left, it actually has an adverse effect on retention. So it actually significantly decreased retention when we just sent emails with the deadline. What significantly increased retention was when we sent emails with the deadlines, the student's activity, as well as the progress bar. So where students could actually see what they had already achieved and they could see what was coming next, and that had a positive impact. So we don't know exactly why, but it's interesting seeing some of the things that we can do on our site to influence students' ability to complete the class. And that's just one experiment. I think one of the most exciting things with MOOCs is the amount of data that we have access to. So this graph here shows all of the different answers in one of Andrew Ng's machine learning class, one of the problems in Andrew Ng's machine learning class. And the big X there, what that shows is 2,000 students who all got the same wrong answer. So in a normal class, if it had about 100 students, and 2 students got the wrong answer, you just wouldn't think anything of it. Those students would have just gotten the wrong answer. But when you have 100,000 students and you can see that 2,000 students got the same wrong answer, you understand that there is something about the way in which you're teaching it that students are getting confused. And you can actually add additional material, additional explanations. You can change the lectures to help address that concern that many students are having. So this is just beginning to show what's possible when you have this amount of data and what possibilities it begins to open up for teaching and learning. Another example is this, of how data can be used within these classes is, this is a class from Stanford taught by Dan McFarland. And he wanted to know what impact having his face in the bottom of the screen, which you can see on the left in student group A, has on student retention and achievement. So he split the class into 2 groups, an A group and a B group, and did a test. So the A group saw his face, the B group didn't see his face, and he wanted to see what impact this would have. Now, this sort of experiment in a normal setting is incredibly difficult to run. I mean, it would be incredibly difficult to have a randomized sample group of students in 2 different classes and it would be very difficult to get a number of students to get significantly significant results. And so, but here in this setting, it's very easy. You know, we have A/B platform testing all set up so the professor could do this with the videos, and he could run the experiment. So this experiment, unfortunately, actually didn't. We weren't able to complete it because in the forums, students noticed that as they were having their conversations, that some students were talking about the professor's face in the video, and some students said that they didn't see it, and it was causing them enough anxiety that we decided to stop the experiment. But I think it shows you what's possible in terms of running experiments and how easy it is that you can get this set up and start testing how to really teach well and how students can learn. So the other thing that we've just started experimenting with is using this content in some sort of blended learning, way. And you know, we know from previous studies that active learning, so having students have discussions and debate and to be actively involved, is a much more effective way than lecture. And so one of the things that we're very interested in experimenting with is having this content be used and having our platform be used in some sort of flipped classroom model, where the lecture is done outside of class, and then in class it's really about facilitating a great learning experiment. And we think that the content that our universities have produced could be used in this manner. I think it's especially exciting. I did a presentation in Turkey a few months ago, and there was presidents from a number of universities in Central Asian countries, and for many of those universities, getting some of the human capital talent to teach machine learning or artificial intelligence or some of these more advanced computer science courses is just not possible. And so the idea that this content could be used in their university setting to reach some of the areas that they currently don't have professors being able to teach is something that we're also interested in exploring. So I guess to wrap it up, and then I will open it up to questions, there's, I think, 4 opportunities that we are really excited about. The first is an opportunity for lifelong learning. You know, we think about traditional education, traditional formal education, and it's really about the 4 years that you're in undergrad, or maybe if you go to grad school, it's 2 years that you're in graduate school. But then you're in your career for the rest of your life, so for the next 40 years. And the idea that college could be something, or college classes or formal learning could be something that happens throughout your whole life is something that we're really excited about. It's also something that in a number of professions, quite frankly, just has to happen. You know, if we look at our engineers at Cousera, most of them are, and most of them have only been out of school for, you know, less than 10 years. Most of them are using languages, programming languages that didn't exist when they were in school. And so the speed that many industries are moving at is going to require a workforce that's going to be able to continually retool itself. And I think that MOOCs could play an important role in that. The second opportunity is learning about learning. So we are collecting just a massive amount of data in terms of how students learn and you know, literally every click that students make on our platform, we're collecting. And we have, you know, both with our analytics team as well as with our university partners, there's experiments that are being run to better understand learning and what works and what doesn't work. And I think that there is a real opportunity here to use data to improve learning and to learn about learning. The third is the potential for this content and what's happening to improve on-campus instruction. So one of the most exciting things has been how much discussion there's been in all of our partner universities on teaching and pedagogy. And what effective instruction looks like. You know, I don't think many people would argue that the lecture is the most effective instructional method. and yet it's probably the most common. And MOOCs and a lot of this online content opens up new options where students can still get that material, but they could, when they're in class, do things that you can only do when you have a professor and you have a group of students. You know, you can build relationships, you can debate and discuss things. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to use MOOCs and use a lot of what's going on right now to help improve on-campus instruction. And lastly, and this is really what drives Coursera and drives this whole effort, is the idea of universal access to education. So when the cost of educating one student in a high-quality class goes down so much, which is what is happening with these MOOCs, it opens up the opportunity, and I think the mandate that everyone get access to a high-quality education, that it should be something that's a universal human right, and that everyone in the world should have access to it, and that there's no reason why anyone should be denied it. And I think that conversation over the last year and a half has really accelerated because it's possible. I think the biggest thing the last year and a half has shown is that it is possible. And that's the direction that we need to move in. So with that, I will close and open it up to questions. And you can just tap your questions, or you can just write your questions into the chat window.
You can put your questions in the chat for Julia, or you can raise your virtual hand if you're brave and want to take the microphone, and we'll let you ask it directly. I thought the shift in pedagogy, or at least the focus on teaching practices in higher ed, is really a fascinating aspect of this. Why wasn't that done well before?
That's a great question. I think some of it is just inspiring the change. It's changing how you teach, or changing it takes a lot of work. And creating a MOOC or creating material online, it takes a lot of work. And I think you really have to be inspired to change. And so, I think what we're seeing is that right now people are starting to be inspired to change.
Julia, so one question I have personally is, and I'm, hang on, I'll hold my questions until I've actually pulled up in the chat here.
Mm-hmm.
So, Teacher Becky says, how can universal equal English only?
How can? Sorry, what is the question?
How can universal be equal if it's English only?
I completely agree. So right now we have 24 of our partners. Actually, I think we actually added 2 more, because 26 of our partners are international. And all of our international partners, we ask that they teach their courses in the native language. We're also partnering with a number of what we call translation partners to help translate our content. And I think this really needs to be an international movement. The courses really need to be in many languages, not just English. I think it's where we're starting. But we do have classes in French and Spanish and Chinese and Japanese, Italian, and that's a big focus for us.
So it seems like education sort of has 2 components. One is access to information or knowledge, and the other is kind of personal transformation. So, a question that I think came up with San Jose State University was, what about the students for whom access to knowledge is not actually the thing they really need?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that what we're going to see is that there's going to be an increased number of options in terms of what a student's educational experience is, and so for some students it might mean an in-person class. For some students it might mean an online class. For some students it might mean a blended class. So I think there's going to be sort of a diverse set of options that students are going to have when it comes to their education. And I also agree that if you look at all of the different components of what a traditional higher education and a real traditional higher education includes, there's this transformation piece. And I don't know whether you can really get that right now online through our courses. Yeah, and I think me, for example, I went to Pomona College, which is a small liberal arts school, and my educational experience was absolutely phenomenal. I had one class with 2 of the top Pomona professors and 3 students, which is just an amazing experience. And I think, if you're lucky enough to have that experience, that's amazing, and you should have it. And I think, unfortunately, that's not the reality of most higher education students. Only 25% of higher education students in the U.S. Have the traditional 4-year residential experience. And then when we look internationally, there's many places where demand for higher education simply outstrips supply. I think I loved my college experience. I think it was fantastic. And I think if it's something that you can afford, that society can afford, that's wonderful. But that's not the reality for many students.
So Margot wants to know, do you see a lot of older high school students taking classes to gauge interest before picking up their college major?
We do. So we see, and also experimenting to see what different colleges are like, to see what teaching at different universities are like, as well as to beef up their college applications. So I don't have numbers, but anecdotally we have seen a lot of students that are taking courses to put on their college applications and to see what different colleges are like and what different majors are like.
So if I've missed a question in the chat, please feel free to post it again. You can also raise your virtual hand for Julia. Julia, it's been a long 3 days. We may just be tired.
Great.
Okay, Jim wants to know, are there any high schools that accept Coursera courses for high school credit?
That's a great question. So not that I know of, but there's lots of things happening that we don't know of. So not that I know of, but if you find out about any, I'd love to know about it. I'd love to talk to them.
Okay, I think we're going to call it.
Okay.
Julia, thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
So I'm going to stop the recording in this room. We still have, we've got 5 sessions coming up at the top of the next hour. We get a little bit of a break here. And sure hope you're having fun still. I'm going to sleep well tonight. I hope that you've enjoyed the experience. Take care, everybody. Bye.